Hello, I'm Keith Johnson. I remember when I was in graduate school and my psychology teacher at one point stopped me in the hall when we were moving between some classes, and he said to me, "What is it that makes you think that God is really alive and that there is such a thing as God anyway?" And without much thinking, at that particular point, I said, "Well, I feel it in my heart. I believe that God exists." Now, my answer at that time in my thinking was not very profound, but that really is the answer. He really is in my heart. And that's where you somehow know that God exists. I remember reading St. Thomas Aquinas, and he had five main reasons to believe God. He called them proofs of God, that God does exist. And I think the most powerful of those arguments to me was the contingency of God. That is, that God is in everything. It makes sense. It gives a reason for everything to exist. And it also brings a symbiosis to our universe that without God we don't understand. Things that make sense because there's a divine intelligence behind it. Nobody goes outside to see that suddenly a miracle of a car has taken place. They have to go out and buy one. And they have to get one that is made and designed for transportation. Nobody expects things to just happen like we suggest sometimes. They have to be built and properly designed. Every nut and bolt to that car has to be in proper position. You don't want to get in an airplane that isn't well designed and that isn't heavily thought about before it gets started. And that's the way all of us are. I mean, imagine the magnificence of the human body. Your heart, nobody can duplicate. They can't duplicate your heart in modern medicine, no matter how much man knows about modern medicine, which in my visit to hospitals is very little. The fact of the matter is, the idea of design behind creation brings sense and order to our way of thinking. And for some reason, which would also be the contingency of God, we have to have in our mind order. We have to have a reason. We have to have a desire to find some purpose and to find some contingency to everything we do. A story needs a beginning and an end for us to watch it and enjoy it. Our lives have a beginning and an end, and during that time, we know we're supposed to make the most of it. It isn't easy to figure out the contingency of God, but it's very easy to see it. You know that we think in beginnings and ends, and that's because that's how God made us, with a beginning and with an end. But that's not what God has, because as the great designer, the inevitable question is, well, in that case, who made God? Well, nobody needs to make God. Just because you and I think in beginnings and ends doesn't mean that God has to come in a beginning and an end. Remember the story of Moses? He's minding his own business, and suddenly he looks over and he sees a burning bush. And because that's unusual, he goes over and takes a look at the burning bush to see what it is. And before he can get there, the bush speaks to him, or at least a voice comes out of the bush and says, "Don't come any closer. Take your shoes off. The place that you are coming is holy ground." And it was God speaking to Moses. God had a reason to talk to Moses and decided to do it through a burning bush, which seems as appropriate as any to me. But so it is that Moses talks to this bush. And when the bush explains that he's the God that created the world and the universe, and that he's got a purpose for Moses, Moses needs to lead his people. And at that point, Moses makes a very interesting inquiry. He says, "Well, who do I tell the people that I talk to? I mean, how do I explain to them which God are you? Because Moses knew many gods. They knew many gods in Egypt. They had all kinds of cats and all kinds of statues. They used to go up to empty statues and say, "Hello, statue." That's how many they had. But in an attempt to understand who Moses was talking to, and now he's going to have to go down and talk to his people and explain to them that he had talked to a bush, and it could only happen through a god. So how would he label him? God made a very interesting comment, one that makes sense. I am who I am. And we give God a lot of names because in our mortality, we've got to name things just like we see life and death, beginnings and ends. We have trouble understanding something that doesn't have a beginning or an end. And of course, everything does have a beginning and end, except God himself, who doesn't need it. I don't understand that. I need a beginning and an end, not only to who I am, to what I do, but to any purpose that I bring into my life, or anything I'm watching on a movie, or story, or whatever. But that doesn't mean that God needs one. That's why God says, "Moses, I could explain to you many things about me. You wouldn't understand. I could explain to you how I made things and why we are here, and I could talk to you about the political situation of the world. You wouldn't understand any of that. Your plans are so far apart from mine because your life is different." God made a very clear statement. I simply am who I am. And that's why there's so much contingency to the universe and to the universes that exist. So many things that you and I don't understand, that we can't see. But it's so foolish of us not to recognize how very much alive God is to the universe in which we live, and to the world in which we live, and to our own personal lives, and how important he is to us. God is imminent. He's in everything, and that was St. Thomas Aquinas' argument for one of the proofs of God, that God was contingent, that everything that we did made sense in him. Everything. The good and the bad that comes along in life, the good things and the bad things that happen to us, the life and death that exists, all of it is contingent in what we know in our heart, that God is there. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me, and that's the point. God doesn't make a lot of sense. God is who he is, and he's not going to take time to make sense to us. There's the old story about the dog that came in the library belonging to the rich master. The rich master had books on his desk, and he had papers on his desk that were very important. And he had some very austere furniture that he didn't want the dog to get on. So he was very careful about where he let the dog go. Now, the way this story goes is this thoughtful rich man sat down in his very elegant business chair and thought about trying to explain to the dog why he did what he did. And he could spend a lot of time doing that. He could explain, these are books. These books have words that you and I communicate on. And as we communicate, excuse me, as we communicate, these words talk to us. They explain to us things about things. And then these books on the shelf have related information. Each book has its own subject, which we then study and understand, like trees, cars, houses, people. And then that's why I put them on shelves this way, so that they're organized, so that I can look and get them for reference when I need to look things up. And this furniture here is for we humans to use. We sit on the chairs, we talk on the chairs, we have coffee on the chairs, and then we explain to each other some of the mysteries of our own life. Now, having spent that time with the dog to explain to him what the library was like, the dog walks out of the room no wiser. He looked at the master and tilted his head a couple times as if he was trying to understand what they're saying. So he gave it up. He just decided to stop talking, stop listening. He walked
out of the room like dogs do. That's the way we are to God. God could take his time explaining to us all kinds of things. We would, like the dog, tilt our head, trying to understand what was going on. We wouldn't be able to. Remember what Moses said? I need to see you, God. I need to understand you. God said, I can't let you look at me. That's why I came to you in a bush. Because if you looked at me, you'd be on fire in amazement. You couldn't stand the glimpse of me. You have no idea what I look like, or you have no idea the magnificence you'd have to behold. I'll tell you what I will do, though, God said. I will put you in a cleft of a rock that can guide you and guard you and take care of you. And as I leave, I'll let you see the back of me just a little bit. And that way, you can get a glimpse of who I am. That's when Moses asked again, well, who are you? Moses, I am who I am. God is who he is. That's why you can't see him. That's why I can't see him. That's why I don't know who he is or what he does. There's so much I don't understand about him. That's why Jesus came, to explain God to us, to explain the image of God and the heart of God and what God was trying to do. That's why we have a Bible, so that God can talk to us and explain to us something of who he is. We can understand a little bit of his personality. But there's so much about God I don't understand. There is one thing, though, that ends up making sense. I don't understand it, but it makes sense. God loves us. God is love. That's why he made us. That's why he created something with beginning and end. That's why he created us in his image so that we could love him and he could love us. Now, I don't have explanations to a lot of that. I just understand a little bit of God's love, and I understand that he loves you and loves me. And maybe that's where we should leave it. Sitting in contemplation, remembering that no matter who we are or what we've done, God loves us. Thanks for watching.